Hello, folks, and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Brooks. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. If you want to listen to that on the regular, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple or Spotify. When you get there, rate, review. But you know you got to subscribe. If you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. Speaking of Mondays, it's not one right now. We are live on Tuesday, but that doesn't matter because you can also subscribe on YouTube. A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers on YouTube. And if you do that and you hit that notification bell on the YouTube page, you'll be notified when we go live, and you'll find our videos every time they get posted. Every time we're live, you can be a part of the show. You can watch our stuff. You can watch Lucas Panzica's videos, his awesome explainer videos that are up there. Go subscribe there at Charlie_Burst, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports National, and AtoZSports.com for all the stuff that Zach writes on the internet. And boy, howdy, Zach. I believe this is what the kids refer to. The kids don't say this, but what the kids would refer to as the dog days of summer is really more. That's what your dad would call it, I think, more than any of your children. But, I mean, it is just the College World Series over, NBA Finals over, and the Stanley Cup over. We are left with MLB baseball and dreams of August, whatever the first day of college football is. What's up, man?
Yeah, it doesn't help that it is blistering hot for late June. It's supposed to be like in the mid to upper 80s this time of year, not almost 100 and feeling like it's 110 outside. It's pretty brutal. It's like August got here quick, minus the football.
I believe the heat index, which is not the actual temperature, the sort of like feels like temperature in beautiful Knoxville, Tennessee today was 107, I think. Just beautiful. Really.
Does that ever make sense to you? The heat index, what it feels like is 107, but that's not the temperature. I mean, I know there's a scientific reason behind this, but if it feels like 107 to me, it's 107. Like I don't
exactly.
I don't understand the how they differentiate that, but that's not a.
I mean, it was hot in the shade today. I was in Charleston, South Carolina, all last week, and it was like real deal 95, and it was tough to just walk in the sun. It was pretty much unbearable. And now that has reached Knoxville. What a joy. It was great. Got in Charleston. Now got it back here at home. Good stuff. But we are not a meteorology podcast. This is talk about Tennessee sports. A ton of stuff has been going on. Obviously, the baseball team, the transfer portal action right now for Tennessee's baseball team is probably the craziest that we've seen in the Tony Vitello era. I think there's definitely a number of elements to it. One of them being the newly restricted roster size coming from the NCAA and the House settlement that happened in that whole deal. You're now throttled down to 34 roster spots. So a bunch of turnover coming for Tennessee baseball, but there's definitely other reasons too. We're going to discuss all of that and huge additions that Tennessee has made in the transfer portal since we talked last, Zach. And then recruiting for Tennessee football and even more setup for the football season, because obviously every day that passes, we are drawing closer to the 2025-26 football season. I guess the 2025 into 2026 season, if we're lucky, if you can make it to the playoff and get that far into January and stuff. But we're going to discuss it all on tonight's Big Orange Podcast, and let's get right to it, Zach. Vol baseball had their season ended by Arkansas, and since we spoke last, Zach, Arkansas, as they have now made a tradition out of, they lost in the College World Series to LSU. And I mean, it's not an Arkansas podcast, but my gosh, like, I love dunking on them because they think they're going to take Tony Vitello and they think they're a better baseball program and all this stuff, even though they have no national championships. But I got to the borderline of feeling bad for those guys, where I was like, wow, you really. Now, they had to win an entire additional game, even if they had won that game against LSU. But up, what was it, 5-3 in the ninth, and then just the most cursed plays. The guy that won the Golden Spikes Award just makes a total bonehead play, and then guy in the outfield who's been incredible all season long makes a boneheaded play, and it just. I mean, I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but it was gratifying in some sense because, let's be honest, we're Tennessee. Arkansas can suck it, but also, boy, I would be in a dark place if I was an Arkansas fan.
Yeah, I mean, you hate it for obviously the kids playing the game that are just kids that grow up playing the game.
Right.
But for Arkansas as a program, of course, we laugh. I mean, you kind of said like they'll blow it somehow, and they did in spectacular fashion. They had the game won. I mean, if they turned the double play there, the play with the shortstop that you're alluding to, and he for some reason throws to third base to get the lead runner, the run that didn't matter, that would have made it 5-4. The play in the outfield where if you just keep that ball in front of you, you still got a chance. And the ball going off of the second baseman's glove to lose the game. I mean, clearly LSU was destined to win this whole thing. And I guess this is a good segue here into Tennessee baseball if you want to. But the way the college baseball calendar is set up, it's almost works against you to repeat as national champs because teams are so portal heavy now, right? Like you've got to have some good portal additions because you don't have time to really build depth, just like every other sport. Basketball and football is the same way. So now if you play deep into June and you play in the finals in Omaha, the recruiting, the portal opens in early June. So it's about 3 weeks, at least 3 weeks that you don't get to recruit. And these other kids are going on visits and they're not going to wait around because they don't know what spots are opening up, right? Like these are teams that are going to be championship contenders, the Tennessees, the Arkansas once they got out, or Ole Miss, whoever it is that's in the SEC, Texas, they're going to be contenders, even in Texas A&M, who wasn't even in, the postseason this year. And so it's kind of funny the way it works. LSU wins 2 years ago. They knock out Tennessee. They want Nate Snead. LSU wanted Nate Snead from Wichita State. He's supposed to go visit LSU. He visits Tennessee. They don't let him go. He commits there because LSU's still playing deep into June, so they don't get that guy. And last season, Tennessee got lucky because you got Liam Doyle and Andrew Fisher from Ole Miss that kind of worked out. Outside of that, I mean, they lost several weeks of recruiting where maybe the team shores up a few weaknesses, wherever that is last season. And now LSU's going to have to deal with that again, and Tennessee's already kind of reaping the benefits of that.
It really is in college baseball now in terms of recruiting from high school and the transfer portal both is a two-man race. It's Tennessee and Tony Vitello, and it is Jay Johnson and LSU. And obviously you can have that discussion, who's the best coach in the sport. Well, Jay Johnson now has 2 national titles. Kind of got hired with a silver spoon in his mouth at LSU because it was the blue bloodest program in the thing.
And he won that battle for Paul Skeens that, Tennessee also wanted him. So that went their way. If that goes Tennessee's way, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
23.
Exactly. Tony Vitello may have to. Frankly, Tony Vitello should have 2 national titles right now. If 2022, I think Tony was still such a young coach and has learned since then. Obviously, went on from there to win a national title with a team that's probably not as talented as that 22 team. He should probably have 2 titles. So you can go around in a circle arguing who it is. I guess you'd say Jay Johnson right now because he has more, but whatever.
Yeah, it's
but
fun.
as far as recruiting goes, I mean, it's these 2 dudes just battling it out, and you have it right now. Like for some of the guys that Tennessee's fighting for, as good as your transfer class has been, the kid from Rutgers. Why am I blanking on his name? Come on. I just saw it. Landon Mack. I couldn't think. Landon Mack, Tennessee. I think he visited Tennessee, and Tennessee definitely wants him. Sounds like he's going to LSU, most likely, even though Tennessee's put the hard sell on him. But you also, Tennessee has cleaned up with Henry Ford from Virginia, who, according to On3 last time I saw, he was the number one transfer in the country. And then DJ Newman you got over the weekend, and then you got more kids from Bowling Green along with DJ Newman, who came from Bowling Green. ETSU's best player, like all of these guys, plus a bunch of young dudes who really, who you're battling now is the MLB draft for a bunch of the freshmen, and you're just in this catbird seat position where for some reason it's gotten distilled down to just these two teams. I mean, Arkansas is getting players, and other teams are getting players, but it is not on the same level as whatever Jay Johnson and Tony Vetel are doing right now. And you can, I don't know if it's just the reputation that Tony Vetel has with how beloved he is, the players coach, the reputation that he's made, how cool it is, the national championship, whatever it is. But they are 1A and 1B, and that's exciting. It's a little frustrating. You wish you were just number one. You didn't have to battle LSU, but hey, it can't be that easy, of course. And it made me a little sick. I like LSU in general doesn't bother me in the same way that Arkansas does. I obviously do not like them at all. It doesn't make me happy. I wish Coastal Carolina would have won that thing. But just watching that team, like the team that Tennessee won with last year was way better than that LSU team that just won the national title. And that's tough because if you just had a couple more pieces to make things fall into place this year, you probably had a team that could have done it, but you just didn't. And it's, you don't want to cry over spilled milk, but it is a little frustrating.
Yeah, you don't want to take anything away from LSU because obviously they went out and earned it. They didn't lose a game in Omaha, but it feels like they just won by default. Like there was just nobody.
Exactly.
Like Arkansas.
They got Coastal Carolina.
Yeah,
come on.
Just the field wasn't that spectacular, and that's any LSU fans wondering here. Look, I get it. Championship's a championship. I wish Tennessee was in that position, and I would. Yeah, I'm sure people would say the same thing, and we'd be saying, "Hey, it's a natty. We don't care. However you get one." But still, it does make it hurt a little more just because Tennessee. It feels like a couple things go their way. Maybe they're in that position, but it is what it is, and you've got a strong portal class coming in. I do wonder, and I hate that maybe this culture is going to come to college baseball. What we're already seeing in college football, where it's playoff or bust, it's championship or bust. Does it become that with college baseball? I mean, LSU gets 2. Now, do you feel like you got to keep up with them if you're Tony Vetel? Because I've always thought, and we've talked about this before, like getting to Omaha, that's the goal, and it's so hard to get there. And then whatever happens, happens. I mean, you never know what team goes on a miracle run, what team has a pitcher that just, for whatever reason, it works out, kind of like Tennessee last year. That wasn't the greatest pitching staff that's ever won in Omaha. Far from it. It was kind of taped together, and it just worked. And sometimes it's just your seasons, and you can't really predict that in baseball. So it's tough to bring that culture to the sport. I mean, even making it through regional play in the super regionals is kind of like that, where you just can't plan for weird stuff that happens, and it's such those short series where anything can happen. But to me, it does feel like it throws some pressure on Tennessee to bounce back next season and to at least get to Omaha. And that's I'm not saying that that's fair, but it feels that way.
It does feel that way. It absolutely does feel that way. When you are in the position that I just described, where it kind of seems like you are 1A and 1B in terms of the team that's just cleaning up on the recruiting and transfer portal trails, you got to kind of be looking and going, okay, Tennessee is full-blown reloading out of a year where they made it to a super regional. Definitely, if they had a just slightly different path, they probably make Omaha this year. We said that at the time. You win the Auburn series and you get to host the super regional too. You probably make it to Omaha this year because of how weak that field was in the tournament. And so I hate that, because what the thinking should be is, how crazy is it that Tony Vetel has made 5 super regionals in a row, 3 of the last 5 College World Series and won one of those national titles. Like, that's so crazy. And then on top of that, like that almost doesn't account for the 22 season that was one of the greatest regular season college baseball teams of all time. So it's it is definitely a bit of a spoiled perspective, no doubt about it. But it also, if you talk to Tony Vetel, I think he's going to tell you that. Like, this dude is totally overhauling this roster because he didn't have the team he wanted this year. I think you and I both listened. We might have talked about it briefly last week. The interview that he did on Tony Basilio, that was sort of
Arkansas,
right after the season ended. It was sort of a postmortem on the season. I mean, I don't want to say he ripped his team, but he kind of did. He obviously there were dudes on the team that he absolutely loved. I mean, he gushed about Liam Doyle and a whole set of guys, and he's the ultimate players coach. And we know all that about Tony, but he was like, these dudes just didn't have it. Like, they just didn't. Whatever it was in those big moments, they didn't. He really emphasized how they just didn't have that punch back after they got punched in the face. And so he's going. It was very clear. And so he's going out and just getting dudes. And that obviously brings us to kind of the conversation the main conversation that I wanted to have here, but it probably is a little much to just be like, well, we expect Omaha now, but I don't know. I don't want to say that.
I think Tony Vitello does. I mean, in that interview that you're referencing, you could tell he's hungry for like this year's motivating him and every player that was on this last year's team that will still be on next year's team. I mean, they're very motivated to get back to Omaha. And I think as a coach, Vitello going to Omaha a few times now, I think that's really why you see so many of the same programs get there, because once you make that trip and you play deep into, June, it's an experience unlike any other, right? In college sports, there's nothing really like that. Even the NCAA tournament is the closest thing that can compare, but that's not even the same because it's not nearly as exclusive. Omaha's one location, summertime. It's just a special event, and it's something that once you taste it, kind of like playoff baseball. Once you taste it, you want to return to that. And when you come up 1 game, 2 games short, like Tennessee did this past season, I can imagine that really motivates you. So we talked about the pressure and saying Omaha or bust, and obviously, if Tennessee fails to make it out of a super regional next season, we'll complain about it, and then we'll hope they reload and find a way to do it in 26 or 27, whatever next year will be. So I don't think it's like Vitello's on job is on the line. The only way his job is on the line is if he stops hosting regionals consistently or even making it to regionals, right? Like, as long as you're doing that stuff and giving yourself a chance, you're going to have a job, especially with what you've accomplished. So it's nothing like that. It's just that's Tennessee fans expect to get there. And I think that's fair because LSU fans expect to get there. Arkansas fans expect to get there. There's a lot of programs. Texas probably, they're, especially after hiring Schlossnagle. I mean, I think those are fair expectations. Even Coastal Carolina probably expects to get there at this point, given some of their success over the last decade. So I think it's a fair expectation. I don't think we should lose our minds if it doesn't happen, because some years it's just not going to happen.
Exactly. Baseball is such a weird sport in general that the run that Tony's been on is otherworldly. On the whole, the consistency in the years-long way that it's happened, it is, again, you can debate this. It's a little more impressive than what Jay Johnson has done overall, just because his has been so much more distilled just down into 2 years and 2 years only, with spectacular pitching that kind of came out of nowhere. And
we had the 2 best players in the entire country in 23 in Skeens and Dylan Cruz. So it was, that
easy enough. Exactly. Isn't that nice when that happens?
Yeah.
But it's tough not to think that way. It is, just because what we've seen this guy do at Tennessee is just absolutely crazy. But the main thing to talk about here, and Kyle's talking about it in the comments, is the recruiting that's going on out of high school, but mainly out of the transfer portal. At the moment, he asked, do you think that Henry Ford will explore his way to Tennessee or get drafted? He's definitely going to get drafted. I tried to drill into this some where I could today. It seems like he's maybe more of a lean to stay at Tennessee. You had one or two guys like that last year where they were huge pickups. They ended up going MLB instead.
Does he have a draft projection? Have you seen anything with Ford?
Not that I can recall right off the top, and I don't want to lead anybody astray there. But
that's ultimately what it comes down to. Because if you're like a 5th or 6th rounder now, the NIL money this year probably won't compete. But if you believe you can turn yourself into a 1st rounder by playing at Tennessee, then I mean, some of that 1st round bonus money is what, $7 million, something like that. I mean, that's what Skeens got a couple years ago, and it continues to go up. So it's worth it, obviously, to come play a year at Tennessee if you think you can turn yourself into a 1st round draft pick. And there's a good chance that's what would happen. I mean, we see it time after time after time at this point. I mean, Gavin Keelan's probably going to be a 1st round pick next month. So there's precedent there that will happen. So unless he's going to be like a 2nd or 3rd, maybe then they consider it. Those bonuses can kind of, they're still pretty lucrative at that round. But I think if you're in those 5th or later, I'd say there's a pretty good chance. Because if you're 5th or later this year, I think you feel like you can turn yourself into a 1st round pick. 73rd is what? Late 2nd, 3rd. I don't know how the comp rounds go, and the MLB draft's weird. If you spend too much money, you lose your draft pick and all kinds of stuff like that. But 73rd is probably in that. We'll just have to see what the money's like. But if you're 73rd this year, I think you definitely feel like if you're Ford, that you can lift yourself into possibly the top 10 next year.
I think so. And I mean, those are the dudes that if you're lucky enough to get them to campus, there's some of the freshmen like that also. The Tennessee, I mean, Tennessee has what, top 2 recruiting class right now. I think it's literally number 2 to LSU at the moment, of course. And you have some of those guys that they're probably going to go first couple of rounds, and you may lose them, and they may not make it to campus. You thought Tegan Coons was going to be gone. He ends up actually coming. And so that's going to be very compelling to watch. I would guess that Tony's going to be in a little bit of having a conniption that night, because a lot of his success for next year might hinge on what happens in the MLB draft. Because I think if you had all the dominoes fall into place, and let's say you don't even get that Landon Mack kid, who is kind of, it seems like he's leaning towards LSU now. If all of the current pieces fell into place, you're probably right around preseason number 1 coming in. I've got to think. I mean, you would have an absolutely loaded roster with everybody that you have coming back, with Abernathy and Manny Marin and all of the dudes that you saw this season. And no offense to anybody, but you're also losing some of the guys that were maybe a little bit of a lame duck there in the middle of your lineup. So, hey, there's something that very special that could happen here, but you are going to have some things roll your way. You're going to have to get the bounces going your direction for that to happen, because there's also this factor. We haven't even mentioned this yet. The 34-man roster restriction that's new for this coming year. In previous years, there were scholarship restrictions, and it's actually kind of crazy. It was sort of ridiculous how small the scholarship pool is for baseball. That has been upped to 34, but now that's the roster limit. 34 scholarships, but that's all the dudes that you can get. Where Tennessee, I think you're up towards 40, 50 guys in the current setup, where you can sort of have this developmental pool off to the side of dudes who basically never play, but you have them in the building. And that's why you get what happened today in a conversation that you and I had, Zach. Let's see. This is Ben McKee, who has become. I need to get him back on the show. He's sort of become like the go-to guy in local media for baseball. He's awesome, old friend of mine. But he put this in a tweet today. 7 Tennessee pitchers have entered the portal. One of them is Michael Sharman, who he played a decent amount this season. Don't love that. And then it's 6 guys you probably didn't even know were on this roster. And we had that conversation today, Zach. We're like, I've never even heard of pretty much any of these guys except for Michael Sharman. And then in those same comments, somebody asked Ben, what is the total number of Tennessee pitchers that are now in the portal? And Ben McKee said 16 pitchers are in the portal for Tennessee right now. I think a big piece of that is that 34-man roster limit. You're going to have to shave it down. You're going to have to make those cuts. And then on top of that, going back to where we talked about that interview that Tony Vitello had postseason, I don't think he liked his bullpen very much. I think he thought that they just weren't that great. And I don't think he just thought that. They just weren't that great. As a third-party observer, they didn't have it. They just didn't. And so he's overhauling the entire thing. And you already, there's a number of other guys going in, Dylan Loy being one of them. That was the most shocking transfer to this point. I wouldn't be completely shocked if you get one more bigger name that goes in. Who knows? Just sometimes when you get these big transfers and guys' spots start getting threatened, you get some weirdness there. But 16 pitchers in the transfer portal, Zach. This,
I mean, they'll
pretty crazy.
Yeah, but they'll if they weren't going to play at Tennessee much, it's a no-brainer because they will find a place to play. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
They may have to drop down a little bit to a non-SEC school or JUCO level, maybe. Who knows? It depends on the situation. But there's no baseball team ever in the history of baseball that's felt like they've had enough pitching. So if you can pitch, you'll find a home. So I'd get that. I mean, it's just like you said with the roster limits now and kind of changing the way things are done. I guess, I mean, that's that's an element of it too that Vitello talked about on Basilio is managing that as well. I mean, you've kind of got to, I guess, over recruit, and then what happens then if you have more players than you have spots? I guess it's been like you get into fall ball and you kind of have to make the team almost in a sense. I mean, is that the approach that they have to take now, or that Vitello will take?
It's hard to say because I think it's basically uncharted waters. Like you're operating in a space now where what do you probably have to do? Doing the math, what, half and half probably pitchers, and I guess it'd be what's 17 and 17.
I mean, if anything, you'd lean more pitchers than position players.
Probably, I would think so. I mean, 34 at the end of the day, that's not that many guys. When you got 9 in the field and you account for injuries and you account for just things that could happen, you see a lot of Tommy John now. And
yeah, I mean, I'd want more pitchers because sometimes, honestly, the fewer position players you have, the easier it can be to manage. I mean, you got to have depth, of course, but it can be. I mean, you get 3 really good shortstops that are all pretty good players. You kind of want one guy playing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just baseball. I mean, you got to get in a rhythm. It's not like, football where you can share the load with a running back or even out play. It's how it goes in baseball. So I would want as many pitchers as possible if I was Vitello. I'm sure he feels the same, similar at least.
I would bet he definitely does. And so we'll see exactly what happens here. He has some of the best transfer pitchers coming in. Brady Fredericks from ETSU, the kid from Kennesaw State. Dude's coming down the pike. Maybe he gets the guy from Rutgers in sort of a coup from LSU there. And there's plenty of potential here for guys that you could get. And there's dudes coming down the pipeline that are visiting. If you want all of those exact details, there's plenty of places that you can go to get those. But Ben McKee being one of them. But I think at this point you got to implicitly trust Tony Vitello. Like, he's just that guy. He has recruited at the tippy top end of this sport for years on end now. And I mean, I definitely trust him. I mean, he found the number one hitter in the SEC this season, even with a quote unquote not as good team that made a super regional. I mean, Andrew Fisher had the most home runs in the SEC this season and was automatic getting on base. I mean, the run that guy went on during the season of not having a slump is just really ridiculous. You very rarely see that. Even Keelan, as good as he was, probably at the top end of his ability, maybe better than Fisher as a hitter, but had a slump, had an injury, had a slump. But, and so even in a quote unquote down year, if that's what you want to call what just happened, because they didn't make it to Omaha, he still found, probably the best batter in the SEC and the best pitcher in the SEC and whatever else. I guess it between him and Cade Anderson now. Cade Anderson suddenly became Superman of the postseason. That was absolutely ridiculous. But hey, we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it here. But as of right now, let's, I guess, just say your prayer. I hate hoping that guys don't get drafted high. I want all these dudes to get drafted as high as possible, but also maybe not so high that they don't stay at Tennessee.
Hope that they're like Garrett Cole. I remember Garrett Cole coming out of high school was drafted, I don't know, like end of the first round, number 30 or somewhere in that range, which is usually you're going to go play professional baseball. He's like, no, I'm going to go to UCLA, play for 3 years, and be the number one pick in the draft. And that's what he did. So, maybe hope that some of these guys have that mindset.
I hope so. We'll find out what happens soon enough. And that brings us to the transition to football. And it's so, I was going to say this earlier. It really is crazy that we can lead off a show in late June with baseball now at the University of Tennessee. How crazy is that? I mean, I started my time in radio and writing about Tennessee in 2015-16, and you would have been laughed out of the place if you were like, let's talk baseball in June. Are you kidding me? They would have told you to get the heck out of there. Do not even have a baseball segment at this point of the year because people will simply turn it off. And we can lead a show. Tony Vitello is on the thumbnail of this show today because that's I mean, it's super compelling. It's probably right now. I mean, it's your main winner. It's the most compelling sport at this school with how at the high level that they play at. So, I love that. But we can. If I will say anything else with baseball, Zach, before we move on.
No, I mean we'll just see how this draft goes. I think what you're saying is just credit to Vitello again. We talked about the pressure and kind of the downside of moving forward and all that, but you just can't credit that guy enough. Not just for the success on the field, but I feel like his personality, the excitement around the team, the way he connects with the fan base just only increases that interest in baseball at Tennessee. So it's just an incredible job all around that he's done, from the on-field product to the recruiting to the way he interacts with the fans, the way he supports the other sports at Tennessee as well. You're just as likely to see him, chest bumping Mike Eckler on the sideline when Eckler was on staff at Tennessee, or sitting courtside in a Zakai Ziegler shirt at a basketball game. It's he's one of one for sure.
Truly, we are so lucky to have that guy around here. It's absolutely ridiculous, but we can't say it enough. I feel like we say it every single week.
We'll say it in October even.
It's so amazing that Tony Vetel is around. But football is still happening, and not just that. Obviously, you're drawing pretty close to the season. SEC Media Days will be in just a few weeks. It was a huge recruiting weekend for Tennessee that just passed, and didn't necessarily. I obviously heard that it went well for a number of guys, but and you got a couple of crystal ball predictions for some recruits. Savion Hyder was in town, number one running back in the class, according to some services. And it was exciting times. Were you able to find the full list, or at least a good list of the guys that were there, like the real high points of who was in town? It was a massive weekend, right?
Yeah, the ones that were supposed to be in was Hezekiah Harris, Savion Hyder, Craig Tutt, Zay Anderson, Javante Smith, Braylon Outlaw, Joel Combe, Braden Rouse, Darius McKinley, Daryl Rivers, Brett Koleje, which is an
Oof.
four-star offensive lineman, quite a name there.
Yep.
Brandon Anderson, Kamari Blair, Gabe Osenda, who's committed to Tennessee, who is now a 5-star in
Yeah.
24/7 Sports. When he first committed, he was ranked like number 380 overall. I was looking back today to see, and that was in January. So in just 5 months, he's went from being, a mid 3-star to a 5-star, which is pretty incredible. Big guy. He's originally from Canada, I think. Carson Sneed, who's committed to Tennessee right now. It's back and forth on whether he'll stick. His brother transferred to UNC from Tennessee. There's a wide receiver. Was it Dayton Sneed? Is that his name? I think
Yes.
so. Anyway, he went to Belichick. He was a guy that wasn't playing much at Tennessee. So let's say Moa, who is, I think he's a two-way guy that could be receiver and DB, kind of like Boo Carter. Start him on defense first, see where he goes, and then Tyreek Keene, who's also a Tennessee commit, pretty highly rated, highly thought of wide receiver.
Got a crystal ball prediction from Chad Simmons at On3 for 4-star linebacker TJ White, the number 5 linebacker in the 2026 class. Got that prediction today.
Yeah, Willie H has been doing a good job.
He has been
in his position.
Yes, and it's nice to see because I think we talked about it in recent weeks. We were kind of underwhelmed by what happened in the transfer portal at Tennessee, the amount that went out, and more specifically, what came in through the transfer portal. I would say I was unimpressed. Am I ringing alarm bells? Probably not. But I feel like, honestly, speaking of Vetel, like you look at what Tony Vetel is doing right now, where he just goes psycho mode and is just every single top guy in this sport is, at least for a couple of days, tied to Tennessee, visits Tennessee, talks to Tony Vitello, whatever it is. You just don't. You see almost the exact opposite of that with Hypel, where he seems extremely choosy, just he's only going after certain guys that fit exactly the vision that he has, and this sort of. So I don't know. Maybe Tony is making Hypel's life a little harder in that way. We have unrealistic expectations. I don't know. But as far as recruiting goes, I like to see the real effort here. That's nice. I think Hypel has some good recruiters on the staff. I think at some positions he has guys that aren't great recruiters at other spots. But on the whole, I'm happy to see this happen. But you got to get the Savion Hyder. You got to make one of these happen. Not just one. I mean, frankly, it needs to be a number of them, because right now the guys that Tennessee is in position with, like decent position with, if you landed all of them, that's top 5 class. Probably top 3. But I'll believe it when I see it, is kind of how I would put it. Not to be tough on Hypel after being so glowing on another coach at Tennessee, but it kind of is what it is with Hypel right now. Like, let's see it. Let's see it, man. Come on.
Yeah.
These guys are showing up. They're getting to campus. Get them in the boat.
And part of it, Austin Price was talking about on Ramon and Will this morning on 104.5 The Zone in Nashville, about how Hypel's just not in his nature to be pushy and push for kids to commit. And I respect that. I understand that. I mean, that can backfire too. We kind of saw with that Richard Wesley at Oregon when he jumped in the pool awkwardly with Dan Lanning, and then his dad is like, okay, we weren't on board with this, and Lanning, if you're the parent, you kind of can feel maybe that's an insult. Like you pushed him to commit before he was ready. Now he's committed to Texas, and Oregon was very much in the mix there. That might have cost him with that kid. And obviously that's an extreme example, and sometimes it does work out. But I think ultimately you just got to be who you are and who you're comfortable with. But I do think Hypel probably needs to be a little more pushy to get some of these kids committed. But however it gets done, it's got to get done. If you want to beat Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, whoever's, these last teams standing in the playoff, you got to get Savion Hyder, and you've got to play him as a true freshman, and he's got to be impactful. You've got to get Tristan Keys and flip him from LSU, which seems very possible. We'll see how that goes. He had a great visit to Tennessee, but unfortunately, LSU got the last official visit. You never know, and that's where he's committed. You never know how that will turn out. That last official visit can be big. It seems like Tennessee still has a real good chance there, but he's the number one receiver in the country. If you want this offense to get back to having a reputation of scoring a lot of points, you need the best talent in the country. You saw it with Ryan Williams, the way he played last season, and Jeremiah Smith, and you've got to bring in a guy like that can produce like that. And, if you don't do that in these next couple of years, you're going to keep landing in the same types of classes, get you close, but not quite over the hump. So you got to hold on to Carson Snead, guys like that, somebody who's a really well thought of tight end who grew up a Tennessee fan and has some concerns about how much Tennessee's going to throw the ball to him in Hypel's offense. You cannot let Florida steal that guy. You just can't. So
nope.
These are these battles that if you want to be elite, you can't keep coming in second. You got to go now. Like, it's got to happen now. It can't wait till 27 or 28.
I mean, I think you saw what you're talking about with your own defensive line last year. Is it bona fide 5 stars all the way across? No. But it was guys who just ended up being right at that elite echelon, and they just crushed teams last year. And you could tell the difference where, okay, the defensive line is one of the best defensive line coaches in America. They have elite players across, and they will kill you. Like, that is the difference that you see. And you didn't have that anywhere other than probably Dylan Sampson. And it hurt you in other spots. And so you got to see it. And I mean, Papa J brings up valid point here. Are we trying too much for legacy players? I'm always kind of skeptical of the emphasis on, oh, well, his dad played here and he's a legacy. And I want the best guy to come play in Tennessee. I'm happy if you want to come play here because your dad did, but are you the best dude that could play this position? Because that's what I care about.
Yeah, there's certain one, like Cooper Witten, which he's a 27 guy. I think he's a legit player, right? Like, he's like a top 40 recruit in that class. He's a guy that you want to get, and maybe you'll have a chance. We'll see how that goes. But really, how many of those guys end up panning out and being great players? We talked about Dylan Bates a couple weeks ago. Even the Barry, remember how excited we all were when Tennessee got the Berry twins. And it's like, oh my goodness, the way Eric Berry played. And there was some, like, Evan Berry had the kick return.
Evan was cool.
Yes, he had some great kick returns. He had the kick return that helped set up the Hail Mary in Athens. But it was Elliott. I mean, they weren't as impactful as you thought they would be, right? And those were some of the more talented legacy type players that you've had. So I think Hypel's, doing his due diligence and trying to give them the proper attention, but I don't think he's just going to go take those guys. I don't know. It's different now too because of NIL and the scholarship numbers and stuff. So you can mess around with that a little bit more, but I don't think that's a big focus for Hypel. I think it's in its proper lane.
Papa J does also say, smash that like button. And he's doing my job better than me. I appreciate that. do smash that like button. And Ty said, like, the stuff that Ty is saying here in the comments, he's definitely not wrong. Just bringing up kind of, there are 4 and 5 star guys across this team. He says the wide receivers, while they're unproven, are 4 and 5 star guys. That's definitely true. And I would say I have expectations for those guys.
Yeah.
This season, I mean, you look at the accommodations that they made for Mike Matthews. I don't want to say he better perform, but he better perform.
He needs to outperform what Squirrel White and Brew McCoy and Dante Thornton did the past 2 years, in my opinion. I mean, this team hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since Jalen Hyatt in 22. That's 2 full years. I mean, Matthews is a 5-star guy going into his sophomore year. It's not 1,000 yards or bust, but you better be up there at 800, 900 yards. Braylon Staley needs to play. I want to see Travis Smith as a true freshman, as much hype as we've heard about him throughout the spring. I want to see him play an important role in this offense because those are super athletic, dynamic, guys that can change a game in one play. And that's what Tennessee needs. That's when this offense is at its best. That's what it was in 22. They had times when they would run the ball when they wanted to, but that's been the focus these last couple of years. Instead of that setting up these deep throws down the field and hitting on those, that's what you got to get back to. Somehow, some way, you've got to be explosive, and you've got the talent, recruiting ranking wise, to do it. You got to see it in action now.
Well, and it would be so big. Kyle's talking about Tristan Keys in the comments here. To have a guy like Mike Matthews truly to be a Hypel recruit who was a really high end guy who you bent over backwards to keep in the house, and then have him perform at a super high level, I think that would help immensely with a guy like Tristan Keys, where you could go, hey, I recruited this guy. He came into this offense. He blew up. He's a dude. Here you go. Here is that example.
Yeah, because Keys is one that you're probably not going to, even if he flips his commitment to Tennessee in July, I don't think you're going to feel comfortable. Kind of like David Sanders last year. Remember, we had that big scare when he took that trip to Columbus late in the season, right? Like, until Tristan Keys is signed and early enrollee in December, you're gonna have to prove something. So I think it is going to matter what Mike Matthews does this season in this offense when it comes to getting Keys.
Yeah, I agree. And it doesn't help that your quarterback situation is very goofy. I will say the more, yeah, who knows what's going to happen there. The more I've watched old clips of Joey Aguilar, though, am I saying he's going to win the Heisman this year? No. Not saying he's not, though.
Are you at like it's like when Tennessee plays Florida every year? By Friday, you've talked yourself into a win, no matter what. Are you at that stage with Joey Aguilar?
I think I'm entering that stage in the Aguilar drama. I'm starting to be like, well, if he came in, maybe he'll be better than Arch Manning. He's going to be at Texas. I don't know. Who knows?
Steve Spurrier's questioning how good Arch Manning is because
I saw
he didn't start over Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, I mean that's
old Spurrier.
Spurrier is not the first person to say that.
No,
I've heard that on other kind of national shows, and it's kind of a fair point. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, like, he started over old what's his face, and it showed. It showed why he was playing.
I think Arch Manning's gonna be a pretty good player. I know there's a lot of talk about the competition stuff, but just seeing that guy, and he's got a lot of work to do. He's got a lot of development to do. I mean, Peyton did too. Peyton still has the record for most interceptions by a rookie in the NFL, but I think that kid's probably got the right stuff.
He probably does. The legacy is too. Maybe. I mean, you look back from. This past season was not great. That team in general was pretty bad at App State. But the season before, go watch his highlights. He had some stuff, some secret stuff that I think could really be unlocked if Hypel can bring his A game in terms of coaching up Aguilar. So
let me see if I can find this one stat real quick about Aguilar and Hooker. Okay. So Hendon Hooker threw a interception on every 44 attempts during his time at Virginia Tech. Because that's been the knock on Aguilar, right? The interceptions at App State. So Hooker threw an interception on every 44 attempts at Virginia Tech, every 126 attempts at Tennessee. I mean, that's a pretty drastic change. Aguilar threw an interception every 35 attempts at Appalachian State. So that's in the range of Hooker's every 44 attempts at Virginia Tech. So I don't think it's, but historically there, what you've seen is the interceptions come way down because of the way Tennessee's offense operates. So I don't think it's out of the question that Aguilar's interception rate goes way down playing in Hypel's offense, just based on what we saw from Hendon Hooker.
I mean, the general style of what Hypel does, you don't put the ball in danger over the middle much. You definitely can, depending on the decisions the quarterback makes, but pretty much all of those passes long down the field, I think Hypel sort of shows them, hey, put this where your guy can catch it and nobody else. If you're going to do anything, go long. And so I could absolutely see that. It's going to be really interesting. I think it even came up in the comments today. Like, I don't think people are super hyped about this football season. We even talked about it here. Mm-hmm. It just feels odd, especially with all the massive changes in college football in general. But the whole thing with Agular is super compelling. I'm really excited to see how all that goes. Or maybe it just ends up being Merklinger, and that's your guy, and that whole storyline gets cut out completely. But
maybe McIntyre after 2 weeks proves to be the best option. Or somebody gets hurt, and I'm obviously not wishing injury on anyone, but those things happen. There's so many things that can happen between now and the start of the season, now and the midpoint of the season. I think that lack of excitement over this season is typically you kind of know the expectations going into a season. It's been a while. 21 was different because it was a new coach. The Pruitt era, you never really had it because 2020 with COVID was a weird year. I felt like it was 2017 was one of those last times where you went into a season having no clue what was really going to happen. We knew we didn't feel good about Butch Jones, but we really didn't know if that team would have anything or not. Obviously, they did not, especially once Jawan Jennings got hurt. But this season is weird where if everything goes right, if the quarterback situation plays out similar to the way that it did with Hendon Hooker, your receivers play up to expectations, the offensive line gels, you're able to replace the losses from the defensive line fairly well because you've got some guys coming back, and you got guys that you hope will step up like Josephs and Caleb Herring. If those guys work out and Jermod McCoy's healthy, everyone kind of stays healthy, and Boo Carter makes an impact on the offense, like the ceiling for this team could be really high, right? But if just like 3 of those things don't work out, then suddenly it's an 8-4 team. So there's such a wild variance and potential outcomes, right, that can happen with this team.
And that's why I am staying. I wouldn't say that I'm hyped, but I'm very intrigued. I'm interested to see what happens this season more than I'm giddy. Oh my gosh, football's right around the corner. I'm more just like, it's gonna be a very interesting year. Like this
from fall camp on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very big testing ground for Hypel just in his general line as Tennessee's coach. It's a very fascinating challenge that he's facing here.
Right. And I will say, and we've said this before, but with the Nico situation, with him going to UCLA and the timing of that, and just kind of everybody having Tennessee's back on that nationally, it sets up for a situation where Hypel's at his best, where there really are no expectations. Tennessee's not going to be in a single playoff prediction that you see, like a legitimate one. You're not going to see Tennessee included, where last year you did, right? There were some they weren't in. There's plenty they were in. They were in the playoff last season, and no one's going to predict them to go back. It's going to be LSU. It's going to be Alabama. It's going to be Georgia. Maybe it's Ole Miss. It's not going to be Tennessee. So these are the situations where it seems like Hypel is at his best. So that's one reason to be optimistic, I think, going into the season. And then I'm with you, just the general intrigue of it all. But when it comes to the impact on recruiting, I do think it's pivotal that your young players really play a big role this season and play well, because if that doesn't happen, that's going to be a weapon that is used against Tennessee in recruiting more and more moving forward.
Yeah, has to happen. And Raphael and Papa J in the comments, they get it when it comes to Agular. He played behind a terrible O-line at App State, and look, they said it, not me. He's going to come in and be Superman. All right. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan, thank you to everybody who tuned in. Anything else before we bounce out of here, Zach?
Yeah, that little O-line comment, that's another thing to watch this year. If Tennessee's O-line doesn't get better, man, the Glenn Ellerby noise is going to get loud, especially from Charlie Burris. I mean, all of us, I know Charlie's ready. I know he's ready to cut that guy loose if it doesn't work out this year.
I am fine with you saying I have been ready for that day to come. No offense to him. I just want a good O-line for this football team. So
yes.
Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan, the A to Z Sports Big Orange podcast. Oh, the football season's getting close. Can't wait. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, to everybody who commented, hung out with us. It is always awesome. We very literally could not do this without you. So thank you for tuning in. It's going to be a little, I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do next week, but Zach is unavailable, so I'll figure it out. We'll make a show's going to happen. Maybe I'll get Ben McKee on. I don't know. Let's see. I was just saying that. Will he still talk to me? I don't know how Ben feels about me. I haven't talked to him in a while. He could big time me now that he's the baseball guy. I don't know what we'll do. Maybe Lucas Panzica. We'll see. Just stay tuned. A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers YouTube channel, the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed, and you'll see it there. That is it. Thank you again for listening, and we will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.